My name is Rachel Mercer. I was the quiet one in the family. Too quiet, as my father used to say. He liked bold people, loud people, people who took up space, people like my younger brother, Daniel. We grew up in a modest home in Des Moines. My father, Gerald, ran a small auto repair shop. Mom worked part-time at the public library, mostly for the insurance. My childhood wasn't terrible, but it wasn't warm either. I learned early that affection in our house was transactional. If you wanted praise, you had to perform. And if you weren't Daniel, you'd better work twice as hard to get half the attention. I was bookish, always curled up in some corner with a novel or scribbling in a notebook. I got straight A's without being asked. I didn't cause trouble, didn't sneak out, didn't drink. I had dreams, but I kept them to myself. I didn't think anyone was listening anyway. Daniel was different. Always charming, always joking, always pushing the limits. He barely scraped by in school, but Dad loved his spirit. "That's how you get ahead in life," he used to say. "Not by being a wallflower." I remember one dinner in my senior year when I nervously told them I'd been accepted into a top business program. Full of hope, I asked if they could help with the tuition. There was a long pause. My mom looked down at her plate. My father cleared his throat and said, "Rach, we're proud of you, but we just can't afford it. Maybe you could work a year or two first. Save up." I nodded, tried to smile. I told myself I understood. 2 months later, Daniel turned 18. The same week he totaled his used car in a street race. I came home one afternoon and saw a gleaming new Mustang parked in our driveway. Red, convertible, brand new. I felt dizzy. At dinner, I didn't say a word. Just sat there, fork idle, as Dad went on about how a man needs a car that matches his ambition. Mom passed the salad in silence. I remember watching the steam rise from the mashed potatoes and thinking how nothing in my life would ever taste warm again. That night, I cried in the shower, not because of the car, but because I realized something deeper. I didn't matter. Not to them. Not really. I was the safety net, the background, the one they'd call if they needed help, but not the one they'd help. And yet, I said nothing. I took out loans, worked late nights at a diner, then at the university's admissions office, slept 4 hours a night, and aced my exams anyway. I didn't go home much. When I did, it was all about Daniel. His new job, his new girlfriend, his big ideas. I stayed quiet for years. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that the girl they dismissed was building something. Slowly, brick by brick. And one day, the same man who laughed when I asked for help would come knocking on my door. Begging. College was harder than I'd imagined, not because of the classes, but because I carried everything alone. The other girls in my dorm got care packages, weekend calls from home, surprise visits from their parents. I got monthly emails from my mother, clipped and polite, updating me on how busy things were. Once, Daniel got into a bar fight and broke his wrist. That got a phone call. I didn't bother telling them when I made the dean's list or landed a competitive internship. I knew better than to expect applause. The internship changed everything. It was with a mid-size consulting firm in Chicago. For the first time, someone saw value in me, not just my grades, but my ideas. I worked late without being asked, took notes in meetings no one told me to attend. At the end of the summer, the CEO called me into his office and said, "Rachel, you're sharp. You ever need a job, you call me." I didn't cry until I got back to my apartment. Back home, Daniel had already crashed the Mustang. Again. This time, drunk driving. They hushed it up. My dad paid off the damages and made excuses. "Boys make mistakes," he said to me on the phone. "It's just a phase." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. By my third year, I was tutoring freshmen and managing 2 part-time jobs. I learned how to stretch every dollar, eating rice and beans for weeks so I could buy one good blazer for interviews. I kept a journal, not of feelings, but of business plans, product ideas, marketing angles. I studied people the way other girls studied fashion trends. Meanwhile, Daniel dropped out of community college. Tried a real estate course. Quit that too. My father let him move back in to figure things out. He gave him a small loan to start something of his own. That something became a failed t-shirt business, then a failed car detailing gig. Each failure was someone else's fault. Once, over Christmas break, I caught Daniel laughing with Dad in the garage. They were talking about how emotional women get when they can't hack it in business. I stepped outside before they noticed me. That break, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to beg for space in their world anymore. I'd make my own. After graduation, I didn't go home. I took the first offer from the consulting firm in Chicago. Entry level, but decent pay. I rented a studio apartment with peeling paint and mice in the walls, and I loved every inch of it. No one called to ask how I was settling in. I stopped waiting for them to care, but I hadn't forgotten. Every sleepless night, every dismissed achievement, every quiet betrayal, I remembered. And I wasn't done. The first year in Chicago was brutal, but exhilarating. I was nobody in a city that didn't care if I succeeded or failed. And I loved that. Everything I earned had my name on it, and mine alone. At work, I absorbed everything. While others clocked out at 5, I stayed behind, combing through reports, watching senior consultants handle clients. I kept notes in a worn leather journal I never let out of my sight. I wasn't chasing success. I was studying it. 6 months in, I got assigned to a project others had passed on, a failing local business trying to modernize its operations. The owner was tired, the staff was jaded, and the books were a mess. But I saw something there. I poured myself into it, reworked their logistics, digitized their systems, coached the team. We turned it around. My manager noticed. "You've got a nose for this," he said. "You don't just fix problems. You see 10 steps ahead." For the first time, I believed it. Meanwhile, back home, Daniel had burned through 2 more business ideas. Dad kept floating him money. Investments, he called them, while reminding me in brief, transactional texts to call your mother sometime. Mom never answered when I did. Then came the wedding. Daniel had met someone, a girl from a well-off family. Her name was Emily. Pretty, polished, and blissfully unaware of the mess she was marrying into. The wedding was grander than anyone in our town had hosted in years. My father took out a second mortgage. To do it right, I was invited out of obligation. I went because I wanted to see them all. See the look on my father's face when I arrived in a clean-cut navy suit I'd bought with my own salary. No date, no drama, just me, whole and standing. The reception was in a rented ballroom, white linens, ice sculpture, a band flown in from St. Louis. Dad gave a speech that made me nauseous. My son, Daniel, he's a dreamer, a builder, a real man who goes after what he wants. I stared at my glass of water, like it might shatter from the tension in my hand. No one mentioned me, not once. Emily smiled sweetly at everyone, and I wondered if she even knew about the DUI, the failed ventures, the yelling matches behind the garage. Probably not. She clung to his arm like she didn't see the red flags flapping in the breeze. That night, I drove back to my hotel alone. I stared at the ceiling until dawn and made a promise I didn't dare say aloud. One day, they'd remember my name, not because I forced them to, but because the world would. The morning after Daniel's wedding, I drove back to Chicago and didn't look back. I threw myself into work like it was oxygen. I volunteered for difficult projects, led internal workshops, and began building a small but loyal network of mentors. I didn't try to charm people, I just delivered results. While others jockeyed for visibility, I stayed focused on execution, and people noticed. At 27, I was promoted to senior consultant. I started leading small teams. I wasn't flashy, but I was effective, and I listened. Clients trusted me. My peers respected me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. It was around this time that I began noticing gaps in how businesses were being served, particularly women-owned startups. They were underadvised, underfunded, and constantly talked down to in boardrooms. I knew what that felt like. I started taking private calls on weekends, free advice, referrals, introductions. At first, it was just to help. Then it became something more. I started seeing patterns, problems that repeated themselves across industries. I kept thinking, what if someone built a consultancy that didn't just plug leaks, but taught women to build their own ships? That idea took root and wouldn't let go. Meanwhile, Daniel's life was beginning to show cracks. Emily left him. 3 years in, she packed her bags and went back to her parents. I heard it through my mother, who sent me a stiff email asking if I'd consider calling Daniel. He's going through a hard time. I didn't respond. I was busy finalizing a pitch deck. Turns out Daniel had racked up debt. Lots of it. Failed investments, personal loans in his name and Dad's. The car had been sold. The house? Nearly foreclosed. I should have felt vindicated, but I didn't. I just felt tired. Tired of the messes he made and the way they always expected me to care. I hadn't been home in nearly 4 years. One Friday evening, as I was locking up the office, I found a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. Voicemail. I played it back in the silence of the lobby. "Hi, Rachel. It's your father. I was wondering if we could talk. I have a proposition. Some things have changed. Give me a call, okay?" He sounded smaller, like he was chewing something sour. I stared at my phone for a long time. I didn't call back. Not yet. Because the company I was building, quietly, methodically, was about to launch. And when it did, the world wouldn't be able to ignore my name anymore. Especially him. The night before my company's soft launch, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and tried to remember the last time I'd been scared. Not nervous, scared. The kind that shakes your core. Maybe it was the night I told my father about college. Maybe it was when I signed the first loan document. Maybe both. But this felt different, because this time I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't hoping for approval. I was leading. We launched on a stormy Tuesday morning. Nothing glamorous. No champagne. Just a small, clean website, a modest office, and a team of 4 brilliant women who believed in the mission. Consulting for female entrepreneurs who were tired of being overlooked. By Friday, we had our first client. By month 3, we had 12. The real turning point came 6 months later, when a national magazine ran a feature on the women reshaping business. I was on the cover, under the headline, "Rachel Mercer, the Quiet Strategist." I mailed a copy to my parents' address. No note, just the magazine. A week later, I got another voicemail. "Rachel, we saw the article. Your mother cried. I'm proud of you. And, well, about that proposition I mentioned, we could really use your help." No apology, no ownership of the past, just a request buried in flattery. I didn't delete the message. Instead, I waited. I had time now, and leverage. I finally called back 2 days later. My father answered on the first ring. He sounded almost humble. He said Daniel had defaulted on multiple loans. The family's house was up for sale, and the auto shop, my father's pride and legacy, was on the verge of bankruptcy. He said he'd tried everything but just wasn't good with numbers anymore. He said he'd heard I knew how to fix things. I asked him one question. "Are you asking for a favor or a job?" Silence. Then, a job. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. Well, I said, send me your resume. Our team is hiring, but just so you know, we don't have titles like dad or owner's son around here. The silence on the other end was a sound I'd waited a lifetime to hear. Not triumph, not revenge, just recognition. And that was enough. For now. When Gerald arrived at the office for his first day, he was wearing a suit too formal for our environment. His shoes were polished, and his face was shaved clean, like he was trying to wear dignity like armor. I met him in the lobby myself. Morning, I said. Morning, Rachel, he replied, voice too low, eyes not meeting mine. I walked him to his desk, one of the smaller cubicles near the back, between two of our younger analysts. It was neat, functional, equal to everyone else's. I'll have Lauren bring you up to speed, I said. We're restructuring a regional client's logistics model. Should be familiar ground for you. He nodded. No questions. No, thank you. Just a tight jaw and a quiet breath as he sat down. It was surreal watching my father try to fit into a world I'd built. At lunch, he stood awkwardly by the fridge, unsure if he could join the others. I watched from my office window as Lauren, half his age, twice his confidence, invited him over with a warm smile. The old Gerald would have brushed her off, but now... He nodded and followed. Daniel showed up 2 weeks later. He didn't call or email in advance, just walked through the glass doors with a half smirk, sunglasses still on, like he was entering a club. My assistant buzzed me. There's a Daniel Mercer here. Says he's your brother? I almost laughed. I came out of my office and saw him leaning on the front desk, chatting up the receptionist. Daniel, I said, to what do we owe the pleasure? I heard Dad's working here now, he said, arms out like it was a joke. Figured there might be room for me, too. I blinked. And what exactly are you offering? He scoffed. Come on, Rach. You know I'm good with people. Marketing, networking, whatever. I can bring value. I looked him up and down, still dressed like he had something to prove, still coasting on charm and confidence that hadn't earned a thing. Submit a resume, I said flatly. If something fits, we'll reach out. His smirk twitched. Seriously? Seriously. He left without shaking my hand. That night, Gerald lingered by the elevator. Was that really necessary? He asked. He's struggling? I turned to him. So was I, for years. You never handed me anything. Why should I start handing things out now? He didn't argue. He just nodded. And that silence? It wasn't surrender. It was understanding. Finally, Daniel didn't disappear. A week after his unannounced visit, I heard from HR that he'd submitted a bare-bones resume, one that conveniently omitted his string of failures and inflated his role in family business strategy. He'd even listed entrepreneurial leadership as a skill. I skimmed it, rolled my eyes, and handed it to my hiring manager with a single note. Treat as any external applicant. No special handling. It was declined 2 days later. But that didn't stop him. He started showing up to our public networking events. At first, it was harmless. Grabbing drinks, dropping my name, mingling with clients he had no business approaching. He told one of our junior consultants he was consulting behind the scenes, and told another that he and I were talking about forming a new division. He wasn't just desperate. He was dangerous. When I confronted him at a Saturday panel, we were co-hosting with a Female Founders Alliance. He smiled like we were in on a private joke. Relax, Rach. Just making connections. This isn't your playground, I said, voice low but firm. You're not part of this company. Stop implying otherwise. He raised an eyebrow. Wow. Power looks good on you. Didn't think you had it in you. The words were meant to sting, but they didn't. Not anymore. What did sting was seeing the way Gerald was slowly folding into himself. He came in early, stayed late, did his work quietly. He was respectful, even helpful, but there was a heaviness to him, a slowness that hadn't been there when I was a child. I saw it when he passed Daniel's name badge, still sitting unclaimed at the reception desk. I saw it when he walked by my office and didn't knock. One night, I caught him staring at the company's core values sign in the hallway. Bold white letters. Integrity. Accountability. Vision. He turned when he noticed me. "You really built this," he said quietly. I nodded. "I did." There was a long pause. "I didn't make it easy for you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because the apology wasn't the point anymore. The past didn't need to be rewritten. I had survived it and surpassed it. But the future? That was mine now. And Daniel wasn't going to take a piece of it just because he'd run out of wreckage to cling to. The incident came 2 weeks later. It was during a major pitch presentation, a collaboration between our firm and a high-profile client from the tech sector. Months of work had gone into this moment. We were in a glass-walled conference room, the kind where everything echoes. Voices, glances, judgment. Right as we were about to begin, I noticed something odd. Daniel. He was standing outside the conference room, chatting animatedly with the client's assistant, pointing inside, gesturing toward me. I excused myself, stepped out, and heard him say, "I've been advising the team on this one since early stages. Rachel's got the execution, but I helped shape the idea, you know?" It was a lie. A bold, reckless one. And worse, it was planting seeds of doubt just minutes before a critical deal. I cut in. "Daniel, may I speak with you privately?" His eyes flicked to mine, then back to the assistant. "One sec, Rach. Just explaining the background here. Number now." He followed me down the hall, smug like a child who thinks he's getting away with something. The moment the door closed behind us, I turned on him. "You just lied. Again, on my company's property during a client presentation." He rolled his eyes. "Relax. It's not like I'm trying to hurt you. I'm helping, boosting the brand." "Number, you're exploiting it," I said. "You're sabotaging something you had no hand in building. You've made it clear you don't respect what I do. But now that there's success, you want to claim it." His smirk faded. "Don't do this, Rachel. I'm your brother." "You were also the reason I went hungry in college while Dad bought you a second car. You were the one they cheered for while I vanished. And now that I've made it, you think you can just walk in and take?" He blinked. Maybe for the first time, he saw me clearly. "If you ever misrepresent yourself as part of this company again," I said slowly, "I will have you banned from every event, every partner space, and every professional circle I'm in. And believe me, I'm in more than you can imagine." He left without another word. I returned to the room, adjusted my blazer, and delivered the pitch like nothing had happened. The client signed the deal within 24 hours. Later that week, Gerald came to my office. He sat down across from me and folded his hands. "I didn't know he was going to do that," he said. "But I should have. I created him, didn't I?" I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I said. "He made his own choices, just like you're making yours now." His voice cracked. "I see it now. Everything I missed. Everything I ignored. I can't take it back, Rachel. But I can be different now, if you'll let me." It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was real. It was earned. And for once, it wasn't too late. The silence that followed was different. Daniel stopped showing up. No more networking events. No unexpected office visits. His name disappeared from my inbox, from whispered conversations, from the lingering guilt that had clung to the corners of my mind. But I knew that silence didn't mean peace. It meant retreat. Gerald, though, was different. He kept coming to work, kept asking questions. He volunteered for tasks others overlooked, and even began mentoring one of our interns. He didn't pretend to be something he wasn't. He didn't try to impress anyone. He just showed up, day after day, as if making up for time in the only way he could, by giving what time he had left. One afternoon, I found a manila folder slipped under my office door. It was Daniel's. Inside was a letter, handwritten, messy, tear-stained in spots. He said he was leaving town, said he didn't know who he was without being Dad's golden boy. Said he envied me, not for the success, but for the strength, for surviving when no one offered a lifeline, for building something when everyone else had taken. He didn't ask for forgiveness, but he said goodbye. I closed the folder and sat in my chair for a long time. Later that evening, Gerald knocked. He'd never done that before. "May I?" he asked, standing in the doorway. I nodded. He sat, quiet for a moment. Then, with trembling hands, he reached into his pocket and slid something across my desk. It was my old college acceptance letter, creased, faded, folded 100 times over. "I kept it," he said. "Every day I didn't help you. I kept this. Told myself I'd do better next time, but I didn't." I looked at the paper, at the ink that marked a turning point no one else had seen. "I'm proud of you, Rachel. Not for the company, not for the title, but for never becoming what I was." And that was it. Not a grand gesture, not a movie ending, just two people, one finally seeing, the other finally being seen. The first time I was introduced as CEO at a national summit, I stood behind the podium, facing an audience of women who looked nothing like my past, but everything like my future. I didn't talk about profit margins or projections. I talked about silence, about how, for years, I thought silence meant strength, keeping your head down, surviving alone, pretending it didn't hurt. But then I learned that silence also hides injustice, that speaking clearly, setting boundaries, and expecting respect is not a betrayal. It's a birthright. I closed my speech to a standing ovation, and when I stepped off the stage, Gerald was there, standing in the back, just watching. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. A few months later, we expanded our office. We opened a second location in Detroit, our first official branch. I gave Gerald the choice to stay or help lead setup. To my surprise, he chose to go. "I want to see something grow from the ground up," he said, "without old ghosts in the walls." He left with a box under one arm and a photograph of the team in the other. I walked him to the elevator. We didn't hug. We'd never really been that kind of family. But he held my gaze and nodded. "I'll send updates," he said. And he did. As for Daniel, I don't know where he is now. The letter was the last I heard. I sometimes wonder if he started over somewhere, learned to listen, to try. But I don't hold my breath. And I don't carry anger anymore. Because the life I've built is no longer a reaction to what they didn't give me. It's a reflection of what I gave myself. One morning, I opened a package at my office. Inside was a card, no signature, and a copy of my old student ID. On the back, someone had written, in shaky handwriting, "You made it, even when we didn't help, especially then." I keep it framed on my desk, not because I need the reminder, but because I earned it. Every word, every scar, every step.